fire us up, Donna? We're going? Okay. I'd like to call to order the budget meeting. It is 6:31 p.m. and hopefully we're going to finalize the budget tonight. That's the goal. And Jenny, you want to take over? Everyone's here. All council members are present, and Mike Hoff is in attendance, so we've got the full gamut. Take
Great.
over, please.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the council. Tonight we are going to begin our evening with the Truth and Taxation hearing for our 2019 budget and the 2018 Pay 2019 property tax levy for the city of Nisswa. So I have just a few slides I'll go over, and I'll just take a couple of minutes just to describe a few of the pieces that are required by statute to discuss tonight. And then we can open it up for public comment. If there are any comments or questions, the council can certainly discuss if they'd like during this time as far as feedback, from the budget, proposed budget. And then in our regular meeting packet, we have 2 levy options and then corresponding budget options in our packet for approval, hopefully, of one of those this evening. So I will begin. So state statute requires that cities hold a public hearing, municipalities hold a public hearing for the public to have an opportunity to discuss the upcoming property tax levy and the budget. The meeting is not intended to discuss property valuations or classifications. That rests with Crow Wing County Land Services Department, but this is mostly focused on city finance, budget, and levy. So what's unique for city budgets and financial statements is that the activities of a city are divided and grouped into what we call funds. Our major governmental fund, most commonly referred to as the general fund, and that houses all of the day-to-day city operations from the clerk's office, planning and zoning, public works, police, all of those types of services that the city provides. We also have our debt service fund that accounts for our debt service payments and any bond issuances that the city has. Our major proprietary funds are our liquor funds, which include Spirits of Nisswa and the Pickle Factory. And then our sewer fund as well is considered a proprietary fund. That's more of a business type accounting for those activities. Our non-major funds include the community center, our fire department, and some smaller activities that we account for on occasion, depending on the activities that happen in the city. So on this slide, we show the 2018 current budget, and this is a very high-level summarization of revenues and expenditures. And in 2018, the council approved for our general fund a spend down of just over $39,000. So that means that we would take in $39,000 less revenues than we would be spending for the services that we're providing. What the 2 options that we have in front of us tonight for the council to discuss later is 2 budget options, and that includes the first one is a balanced budget, and that is reflective of an 8.71 increase in the property tax levy for 2019. That correlates to a balanced general fund budget. And then the option 2 below is correlating to a 6.99% increase in the levy from the current year, and then that would reflect a spend down of $37,000. And what that means is that we would take $37,000 from our savings account or our reserve money that we already have and use that to supplement the expenditures that we need to pay for next year in lieu of levying those dollars. For the public to know that we started this process and this conversation for the 2019 budget back in July. The initial budget draft that the council saw reflected a 13% increase in our levy based on balancing the budgets and just the first glance of putting all of the department information together and seeing where that landed. In September, the council approved a preliminary levy maximum at 9%. So we had to get from 13 to 9 at a minimum to do that. And then hopefully going forward, try to lower that to the extent we could. Employee wages and the bond issuance for our 2018 street improvements that we did this year equated to just over 5% of the increase. And so there wasn't a lot left as far as opportunities based on then other reductions we looked at in the general fund budget, but based on utility costs and just the rising costs in general for providing services, kind of equated to that, filled in that 4% difference to get to that 9 at that point. The council also held the city health insurance contribution flat for 2019, which saved our budget about $8,000 at a minimum, which was a good decision by the council to help kind of manage some of those costs. So as I mentioned in September, the council proposed a preliminary levy of the $2,348,916, which reflected a 9% increase over the 2018 levy. So the final levy has to be that same amount or lower, so it cannot be higher than this amount. Mid-November, the property tax statements went out countywide, and then tonight we're having our hearing, and then at our regular meeting we'll make the final decision on our levy and our budget. So just to show a little bit of history on the levy, the certified levies for the city, this first option reflects the 8.71. So we did get from 9% to 8.71. So we get a slight decrease from the preliminary levy, reflecting a $6,000 decrease from September. The option 2 is the $2,305,000, a 6.99%, and that reflects a decrease from the preliminary levy of approximately $43,000. I provided this information to the council at one of our last budget workshops. For 2018, the city of Nisswa was the 5th lowest tax rate in Crow Wing County. When I looked at the other cities who were lower than Nisswa, Cross Lake, 50 Lakes, Fort Ripley, and Manhattan Beach, I did notice that Cross Lake's really the only other comparable city, meaning like services, tax base, that kind of thing. And so we're really second lowest when you compare with like cities and the services we provide. So we should be proud of that and work towards keeping that fiscal responsibility. Property valuations do have an impact on resulting tax owed by our taxpayers. It's a complex system. Typically when I get phone calls, the first thing I ask is, well, did your taxable market value go up or down? Because that will also play a role in how much tax you're going to see. So regardless of the levy percentage that the city approves, the property taxpayer may see more or less. It just depends on other factors, including their own market value, other classifications market value, and if classification percentages as a whole see a change. For example, in some of the review I did, I noticed the commercial properties seem to have decreased in value consistently. That means likely they have a smaller percentage of the pie, which means it has to get made up for somewhere else. And so not only if your home valuation might have gone up, the residential classification section also went up, so you might get kind of a double impact there. But here's just a breakdown citywide as far as the different types of classification percentages. So at this time we can invite public input and then answer council questions if they have anything for me to answer. And I'll leave it at that at this point, and please let me know if you have questions. Thank you. We have a small group tonight, so.
Yes. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask any questions about the proposed budget? Hearing none, council members?
We're going to discuss it when it comes up in the meeting, right? I mean, the dollars.
Yes, it is included in the regular agenda for approval. If we have time, if you want to make some comments or, I think that's perfectly fine to do as well, but that's certainly up to the council.
I think now it'd be nice to get to a point where we have it figured out, and we can just motion and move it forward as possible. If we can get there, great. If not, we'll discuss it more.
Well, when we talked before, and we talked about 7%, I said, let's take some more money out of the reserve fund and get it even lower, and I got a negative reaction from several of the members of the commission here. I would still like to entertain that idea. It takes about $18,000 to lower at one point. So that's still open to us if we want to lower it below 6.9. We can do it, take it out of the reserve fund, and just throw the idea out again. If I get outvoted, I get outvoted.
Well, I'm certainly, myself, I'm open to that idea. I expressed that at the last meeting. And, I would have no objection to lowering the percentage.
So in addition to the 37, you're saying an additional 18?
I think it's about 18,000 for each percentage point.
Remind me again, in this budget, where have we left things with a truck for public, or for Park and Rec? Are we factoring anything in?
I think there is
Yes, there is $10,000 included in the budget for them.
Have we thought
For
about
next year.
doing what we did with the fire truck? Doing that for Park and Rec truck?
I believe there's been conversation. I think Matthew has kind of checked in with some of the council. I'm not sure how many, as far as if that would be an option for them to basically get the truck next year and loan that money from the general fund and repay it.
So if we did that, that would be a $10,000 reduction to the budget.
So I think what Matthew would look at maybe would say, okay, I budgeted 10,000 in my department for a used vehicle. If I go with a new vehicle, okay, then the difference could be probably around $8,000, $9,000 with state bid. Say, borrow the difference and then pay the difference back, as opposed to
Just
eliminating the
difference.
10.
So leave the 10.
Yeah.
Leave the 10, and then next year you'd budget the remaining to pay back the general fund, so.
Gotcha, okay. All right.
One thing that's come up, and I don't know who's talked to who and who knows what and whatever, but one thing that came up is you can buy a halfway decent truck for $15,000. You can buy a brand new one through the government program for probably in the low 20s. So for 7,000. I mean, I'm picking a number.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, but just in conversation I had with Matthew, for not a heck of a lot more, could get a brand new truck because of the discounts that are available.
Yeah.
So there's certainly, and I asked him, would you have a garage to keep it in so it would stay out of the weather and so on? And he's like, yeah, they do have that. And so as far as, which is a little bit part of this discussion, but maybe a separate discussion too, but I would certainly be in favor of a new truck.
Yeah, I think that
Just
makes
because
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have a warranty for X number of years and probably no problems for a long time, so
Yeah.
seems to be some logic to that.
Okay, I'm sorry I got us off track there. Right?
No, it's a reasonable question. I mean, I think that is part of the, and I guess we couldn't we take the 10,000 out of the budget? That is proposed, and pay for it out of unassigned funds and then pay it back. We could do that. We could do it either way, correct?
You could, but at some point they have to pay it back.
Right.
So if it's in the budget now, at least you're partway there.
Sure, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Personally, I kind of envisioned that maybe in January where we iron out some of those details and we can work on this is how that would look. Because we wouldn't impact the budget, we'd just pull from a reserve
Yeah.
account, make the payment, and then just continue on with that line item for the parks for next year to pay out the difference.
I guess I would not be in favor, I'd be in favor of option A, having a balanced budget. Again, so what are we going to do next year to make up the 43,000? I think that, since we're close to Cross Lake, we're the fifth lowest, I think we do have, we're not overspending. I think that proves that. To the public, it looks like we got 6%, but we're really not lowering anything. We're just taking money that we worked hard to save, and we're applying it towards that. In talking to Jenny, and I believe that is your preference is the first option? Jenny,
My recommendation is the balanced, yes.
is the balanced budget, because if we don't have a balanced budget, that does affect our credit rating, or our ratings. And it is what it is. I mean, it's just getting expensive, and I think that we just, and then especially when you see really how little it does affect individually, their payments, I just don't see the reason to take money that could be used better elsewhere, especially if we use it towards things where we're having to bond or,
Maybe able to save bonding.
So I guess I'm thought about it a lot right after our last meeting. I thought about it a lot, and my mind hasn't changed. I don't think that is the right decision. The only way to deal with the budget, in my mind, is if you want to lower it, you lower the budget. Or if you want to lower the percent, you increase your income. Whether that's through trying to get some building going, whatever. But I just, and again, if we had extra, I think our budget is lean. So that's all I'm going to say, but that's where I stand on it.
Well, I've been looking at it. I looked at my personal rate, and the dollar difference that I have to pay a year is negligible from from 7 to the balanced budget. I share Ross's concern because I've been looking at it, and we're basically shuffling roughly 2 point some percent to next year. And then we're going to have next year's cost of living adjustments, any inflations and whatever, everything goes up, wages and everything. And we can kind of sort of figure out what we're going to have ahead of time. We don't have the bond that we're paying next year. It's going to be a flat rate because we have another bond coming off. Plus, some of the Grandview stuff might start trickling in, I believe, 2020, 21. Okay. I think we're better off balancing it this year and then take a look at where these expenditures are and really get out there and ask the people in town, what do you want? If you want everything you have, then this is what we have to pay. If you want less, then okay, come talk to us. What do they want? And I think my biggest issue, or my biggest not issue, but my biggest problem was whatever we don't levy this year, we have to try and make up next year. And when we're going to borrow from the general fund to balance a budget, we do have the potential negative impact on our credit rating that we could see and stuff. But more importantly, as we just saw at the last meeting, we're looking at a 7-digit road improvement that's going to happen mostly at the expense of the county. But if you take 15% of that, that's about $100,000 and some thousand that we don't get even really much of a choice on. because we have to share it with the county. Maybe they'll change their policy, maybe we don't have to, whatever, that's fine. But those are the little things that might come up. Though, I mean, it's $100 and some thousand we weren't looking for, we didn't have a call on. I know in talking to Matthew, the coolant plant is belly up. I was actually sort of surprised that the cost wasn't higher for a new one, but we got to change it anyway because we got the wrong kind of refrigerant and stuff. So there's all these little things that are going to come up, and having the savings there is really kind of nice to not all of a sudden have a, pass that on, in a levy area or bond something if we don't have to. I like the idea of the truck. I talked to Matthew about that at length. I'd suggested maybe he look at going to state bid and looking at getting a new one because the difference in cost is so negligible that for what they do and what they're going to use it for and the amount of miles they're going to put on for a year, we'll probably all 5 of us be gone and buried before they ever have to replace it. And, like I know Terry and Tom have talked, Matthew and Tom have talked. I mean, if they come up with a need for something heavier or bigger, they can always use one of the trucks out there, for that particular project. So they're all working on it. But I really think that we should, it's the cost of doing business, and I would agree with Ross, and I agree with what Jenny is saying. I think we should look at that, balancing it out, and hopefully get a better picture for the people. This is what it costs to run. I don't like it. I wish we didn't have to raise anything, but that's not reality. So.
All that being said, I still don't have a problem with taking the 10 out for Matthew's truck and just paying cash for the truck and not having it paid back. Again, I think that truck will last us a long time. It's a one-time purchase, and it's not something we got to try to make up next year or whatever. So I think that would be. I don't have a problem with that. I guess I don't know how the rest of you feel, but
What does 10 do?
Not much.
not much. But it's still.
It's still 10.
It's still 10.
Gary?
I'm in agreement with Ross and John. I think with a lot of the stuff coming up, I'd like to have that safety cushion in there. And yeah, it's nice to be able to say we only did 6.99, but the difference is, as John said, negligible. I'd like to keep those funds in for purposes, other emergencies or areas where we could get by without bonding, to have that money available.
Okay. Don, anything else?
Well, I can see I'm going to be outvoted. But that's not new. That's happened to me before. My only point is that we're sitting on $4.6 million in the fund that we're not using for a whole lot of anything. And to drop the levy a couple percentage points, like $35,000 to $40,000, is not going to harm the $4.6 million in reserve. And I just think that we can drop it, get it as low as we can, and the reserve is still there without any problems. So I would be in favor of going to at least at a minimum option number 2.
Kind of keep in mind it's not a $4.6 million reserve because we still, we can probably, you guys will decide that, but 1.5, 1 million, 1.5 is still going to be left as backup for the city, not.
Right.
So it's not a $4.6 million true reserve. You still got to leave some there.
$3 million with the reserve, yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Mr.
Anything
Mayor,
else?
I move that we'll close the public hearing then.
I would just like to, before we do that, I would just like to see if there's any other discussion on this, because if we wrap it up here, we can do a pretty simple move forward during the council meeting. So, any other? Okay. Don? Motion? Motion to conclude?
Okay, I'll move we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Second by Krokreimer. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We will re-adjourn in 5 minutes. For the
Re-adjourn.
You know, we will reconvene. We will reconvene. Honest to God, I know I have some delay.
You didn't know you were sitting next to the grammar police.
The dyslexia police.
I think it's like 6 or 8.
It was used when we bought it.
Or if you-
Mr. Anderson bought it for the
If
city.
you build a home, you have to live in it.
I know from at Schaefer's, when you got free
8
on.
weeks, and you can rent it out the rest of the
Yeah,
time.
free on.
But if you already have an existing home, it's different. I'd have to go look at the ordinance again.
I was just curious.
You want to rent your house out? People are
3,500 or 35 grand?
people are just coming down hard.
Yeah, let's do that.
A lot of things.
Let's move that stuff
Yeah.
back over.
Oh, well. What are we doing here?
Gonna lose that, John. John,
Well, that's what it was.
That's the left.
Depending on which way you're looking at it. This way it's to the right.
You know what we're
American
doing?
flag is always to the right of the speaker when you're standing facing the crowd. Standard flag etiquette.
And these Irish people know all
I'm an Eagle.
the answers.
I'm an Eagle Scout. I know.
Okay, I would like to call to order the Wednesday, December 19th, 2018 City Council meeting. It is 7:03 p.m. Would you all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. First item on the agenda this evening is the consent calendar. Are there any questions that any council members have regarding that this evening? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ryan. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Onward and upward. Open forum. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to address the council with any concerns that are not on the agenda this evening? If you have anything, now's the time to come up and share. Seeing none, we will close the open forum and move on to staff reports. Item D1, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Just a couple of items. I I know I received a question last month just about an update on our website project. That is coming along still, and Revise will send me an updated timeline just to make sure everything is going well on their end, but we are moving forward and getting towards the end of the project, so we're looking forward to the point where the staff has the opportunity to start to get their information loaded onto their new pages, but so far it's still continuing and going well. The other update would be, just for those who don't know, Matthew, our Parks Director, let me know on Saturday that the compressor for the cooling system at the rink essentially blew up, and they are working with the insurance company to see what could be done and repaired, and we had some other damage in our garage as a result of that, but he's got that under control, and we'll get more information to the council once we know where we're at with that. So won't have any impact now this time of year, but likely would mean that we're not going to have the rink open later in that late winter time frame when we use that cooling system more. So those are the two updates I have, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Is there not a chance that that can be repaired in the next few weeks?
Likely no, but that is something that we actually had it serviced for other, not compressor reasons, but for other reasons recently, and it just takes a good deal of time based on the age of our system that we have. So we'll know more in the next week or so what we can do with it.
And plus, we lost all the Freon,
Right.
and we can no longer use Freon. So it would be
Right.
it's going to have to be a totally new
New
system.
system, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it can take time with the insurance companies to work through that unless there's an absolute dire need, so. Okay, thank you. City Attorney, Mr. Pearson, do you have anything for us? What do you have for us this evening?
I have nothing to report tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hallen, City Engineer?
Just two short things. Our survey was completed on Hazelwood and Smiley South this week. If anybody saw them out, we've been fortunate for no snow, so that work was completed this week, just as an update to that. And then our Justin Schultz, he continues to work with Matt and city staff on their applications and stuff for funding that they're looking at for their multi-purpose use trail or bike trail. That's
As
all I
it's
have.
commonly known, yes.
Yes, yep.
Okay, thank you very much. On to new business. Item E1, resolution approving final 2018 tax levy collectible in 2019. We have two options before us this evening. Option one, total levy collectible in the amount of $2,342,653, which would create a balanced budget. And option two is a total levy collectible in the amount of $2,305,653, which the difference there of, I think it's $37,000, would lower the levy collectible by a couple percent, and it would be done by using basically savings, but our unassigned fund that we have, which currently has $4.6 million or something like that in it, roughly. So we'll start there. We need we did have a meeting before the council meeting regarding that. We need to take action this evening. So, council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we adopt option one and approve the levy option one as stated from above A.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay by Mr. Jacobson. Item E2, approve the 2019 city budget, which basically we just did, didn't we?
No.
No?
Approval levy.
Mr. Mayor, I'll
Approval
move that we approve the 2019 City of Nisswa budget based upon option 1 as just approved.
Second?
Seconded by, sorry, I'm brain dead again, Mr. Johnson. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item E3, request from Nisswa Fire Relief Association to increase retirement contribution level. And we have some information in our packet on that. Are there any questions? Fire chief is here, if there's any questions for him. Did you want to make any specific?
I spelled it out in the letter. If you have questions, we're happy to answer.
Okay. Yeah, let's see where it goes, Sean, and that we do have information about it, so.
Mr. Mayor, just for my information, I think I know the answer to the question. This money that we're allocating actually comes from the state. It's not budgeted. Just wanted to put that on the record.
Correct. These aren't city funds.
One question that I have, and I did look through this a little bit, and I am assuming by the line that is drawn through the second page of the handout that we have, that raising the benefit level to $3,700 per year per fireman. Let's see, where did I see it here? So am I correct in understanding that the value of the assets is what would be available or the surplus, I'm sorry, projected surplus, $270,000, is that is after the increase? So there's still an annual surplus of $270,000.
We have a surplus of 25.82% if everything went this out. Does that make sense?
No. Not to me. It may to the councilman, but it doesn't to me.
The fund's at 1.4,
Mm-hmm.
and we're only using 1.108. So there's basically 25%.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see.
Basically,
I see.
if they lost $270,000, they can still fund. So, but just so you guys kind of realize this, is that there is no, all this money that you guys work hard to invest and stuff, but at the end of the day, if things do go south and the city and the fund becomes underfunded, the city has to write a check to cover it. So there is some liability there to the city. So.
And we've always ran this fund at about 125%. That state recognition is anywhere between 110 and 115% funded is what the state recommends if we were in the state program. So if we look at that, go to 118, you go to $4,000 easy. But we take the conservative role and we're only asking for 37.
And at the current level of $3,000, it's funded by almost 150%.
Yeah.
So we're looking to decrease that down to 125. Just out of curiosity, Sean, how often does that 1.3 go up? Does that go up? Does the state?
I see that statement every month from Stifel Nichols, is who does our investments. 1 month you'll be up 70, 80,000. The next month you'll be back 25. The next month you'll be up whatever. It's up there. 60% of our funds are secure. 40%'s a little bit more risky. It's not like going and buying toothpaste stock. It's in buns and.
It's very regulated on what
it's
can be
regulated
invested.
on what it is. To
Right.
lose the 40% is it's not going to happen, is what they're telling us. It's pretty secure. But the 60% is solid. The 40%'s a little more risky.
But does the state issue money to the?
Yes.
Every
through
year?
we get 2% monies from the fire insurance peoples every year.
And about how much is that?
About 60,000.
About 60,000.
Yes.
And does that go up like by
It depends on what you
couple,
guys do
3% a year?
with your taxes and what the insurance rates have done. So
Actually,
it's always gone up a
So
little
it's
bit.
2% of the, probably the value of the city of Nisswa.
But
And-
it's a government thing, because it was
Mhm.
probably about 5 years ago, the state figured it's been calculating it wrong. I don't know how you calculate 2% of a thing wrong, and so it dropped it, I want to say it dropped it like $13,000. So it is, I mean, I always thought, hey, we get 2%, but the state came and said, no, we're calculating it wrong all these years, and then lowered it, so, but yeah, it's about 60,000, and it is based upon the value. It's kind of based upon the value, but your fire, when you pay your insurance, 2% of that goes to fire department.
Yeah.
And then the city and the contracted areas kick in
$15,000 come from the
$15,000 a
rest.
year. And then the rest of the income is made up by investments.
Okay. Answers my questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the request of the Nisswa Fire Relief Association to increase the retirement contribution from $3,000 to $3,700.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Kramer. Any question on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item E4, resolution adopting polling place for 2019. Jenny, I take it was the city of Nisswa, and we probably want to keep it the city of Nisswa.
We are keeping our polling place at City Hall, even though there is no election for 2019. Per statute, we have to establish the polling place. So,
Okay.
yes.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we accept the resolution establishing the polling places in Nisswa City Hall.
I'll second.
Seconded by Kramer. Thank you. Questions on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E5, Knife River payment request. And this is, we're getting down near the end of the payments for the road projects for 2018, and there's still a, 5% reserve?
Retainage left over
retainage
springtime,
for
make
next
sure
spring,
some
yeah.
of the seeding takes and all that. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And I believe I saw it was basically, everybody was in agreement that that money was due. Yeah.
Yes.
Mark, I mean, you and Tom look at it, and,
Well, it was Justin.
or Justin, oh,
Yeah, with our office, he was the project manager for
Okay.
it in the city staff.
Okay.
Yes, they went through it, and he came and talked to me about it, and we went through, recommending the payment.
okay, very good. Council?
Jenny, I got a quick question. So I thought I understood it, now I'm reading it. So we've already paid the county, or I'm sorry, invoiced the county for $129,402,
Yes,
and now we're going to at this time invoice them for the $22,786,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then that'll be their whole portion invoiced.
yes, and then they're done.
That's
Yes,
what I thought, I just wanted to confirm.
yes. So the partial payment to Knife River will be the $90,857.42, and then we will bill the county for the $22,786.35.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we accept the project payment application to Knife River Corporation as presented by Davis.
Second.
Second by Johnson. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E6, recommendation from Public Works Committee for the proposal of engineering services for Hazelwood Bridge. Is that really supposed to say the 2616?
It's the bridge number.
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah.
wondering if that was...
Yes, no.
Not pushing it that far out.
Yeah, I was like, wow, we don't really have to worry about that paying for that for a while, do we?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we approve the motion from the Public Works Department to approve of WSM proposal for engineering services for Hazelwood Bridge in the amount of $28,700.
Second.
Second by Ryan. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E7, recommendation from the Planning Commission to rezone the application number 028-18 for Rusty Gibbons, for the property just north of us here, which I believe is 13.some acres.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This is an application for rezoning from Central Business District to urban residential. The subject site is 13.03 acres. It's located south of Poplar Avenue, east of the Paul Bunyan Trail, and north of Hills Crossing Drive. Subject site, as I mentioned, is currently zoned Central Business District. Property to the east and a little bit to the north here is zoned urban residential. Property to the south is Central Business District. The Paul Bunyan Trail is identified as public, and across the way is over by the Legion. That area is also Central Business District. The comprehensive plan does call this area out as neighborhood residential. That's this area here in the yellow. And then also the bottom portion of it is identified as downtown transition. Downtown transition is an area that is intended to essentially gradiate away from the downtown area. It's intended for high-density housing is what is called out for that particular area, whereas the neighborhood residential would more or less align with the UR zoning district. There are several elements or components in our comprehensive plan that would be supportive of this zone change, and one being that new developments should be encouraged that are compact and utilize the existing infrastructure and designed in a manner that facilities and designed in a manner that facilitates pedestrian traffic. Of course, Paul Bunyan Trail is right there. It's about a quarter mile from the south part of this property to the downtown. Also, increased housing density and flexibility design should be encouraged where municipal utilities are in place. Another one is development shall be sensitive to the character of the existing neighborhoods. New homes and buildings shall blend and fit in with the surrounding environment. A successful downtown includes a range of needs, which would also include housing in addition to shopping and commercial services, employment and entertainment. Also, increased housing density and design flexibility should be provided where municipal utilities are present, with direct pedestrian access to commercial areas. So now, while this is being proposed for UR zoning district, I understand that the applicant will in the future be coming forward with a PUD, which may allow for additional densities if approved. Under the current URs, or if it is zoned to UR, generally you could anticipate maybe about 16, 17 units if they didn't come through a PUD. The applicant would want to come forward with sort of like a pad lot development, from my understanding. That would provide more open space for the development, but would make smaller lots, essentially, and would be surrounded by the open space. So the Planning Commission is recommending that the council approve the zone change and adopt the findings of fact presented in your report. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Desmond.
Yeah.
I personally don't have any questions on this myself.
Just to let the council members know that the vote of the vote of the planning commission was 4 to approve and 1 no.
Okay, thank you, Doc. You know, if there's a comment that I have, I think that's a wonderful piece of property for residential use, and, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a hidden gem that's been tucked away for decades, and, you know, I think overall it has the possibilities to be a nice little neighborhood.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we accept the rezone application 028-18 as presented.
Second.
Second by Jacobson. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, because my property abuts this, I'm going to abstain from any discussion or voting on the matter.
Okay. Very good. Hearing no questions, call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. One abstention. Okay, moving along, we might go down to item E8, recommendation. Recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to accept, I got that right now. Yeah, E8. Recommendation from the Planning Commission, ordinance amendment revising regulations pertaining to parking lot and loading standards. Desmond, you have some things you want to?
Just a general background on this. The Planning Commission generally had some concerns about parking, and that a lot of times businesses seek to look to maximize parking and impervious areas to the extent possible. What they were looking to do with this ordinance is essentially eliminate the city parking minimum standards and replace that by allowing an applicant to come in and provide the city the basic minimum they think they need in order to facilitate or provide parking for that development. So that is the general premise of this. There are some changes in here that may be a concern. I think one of them relates to the commercial, or I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading this. In the CB zone, it does require on-site parking, and then also in commercial zoning districts, off-street parking shall be provided. On-street parking is not to be allowed under any circumstances. So, I mean, since this is in the zoning ordinance, I guess it begs the question whether this would be a zoning enforcement type of thing, where the zoning official would be out there writing tickets, and I don't think that was necessarily the intent. I think it was intended for new development. So, with that, the Planning Commission is recommending approval of this. It was crafted by a few members of the Planning Commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. So this is not really the downtown business district. This is primarily other.
It addresses all the zoning districts in some capacity.
Citywide. Because I do have some questions and concerns. To start out, I'm not quite sure it's not numbered page-wise, but about 4 pages in. We have at the bottom, where the yellow starts, parking requirements. On-site parking or garage space shall be provided in all districts. So when I hear downtown business district, if that's part of it, I'm going, that's virtually impossible for most businesses to provide on-site parking, much less garage space. So am I confused or missing?
Obviously, it wouldn't be directed towards any types of businesses fronting Main Street. That's a grandfathered condition. This would essentially be applicable to new development, even new development within the central business district. And there are a couple of outlying pieces, of course, down by the roundabout. There's a few smaller pieces around City Hall that have yet to develop. Those would be applicable to, off-street parking requirements would be applicable to those properties. it should go to say that I should mention that we do currently have that requirement. It's basically when Bob Johnson came in for his site plan, he did need to get a variance for the parking, because the required parking of a restaurant would have been like 31 units, and he ended up only putting in 7. But of course, there were extenuating circumstances associated with that property there on Main Street, and so there are mechanisms in our current ordinance that can address it, but somebody would have to apply for a variance. This kind of gives the Planning Commission some latitude to say it's required on site, but that there would be a certain amount of latitude given to the commission for how much parking is provided.
Okay.
The vast majority of the changes you see are stuff that's already in ordinance in other places. We're just moving stuff around and putting it together so it's easier to find and understand. And it does relate citywide, but there are differences in parking stall size and landscaping sizes, depending on the zoning district that you're in. So when I say it applies to the whole city, it's because it has parking restrictions for the whole city, but they're not all the same.
Okay. Another question that I have is, and this is a little bit more general, and but I was kind of looking at number 3 on the second page of the highlighted, and that is, something that I think, and I wonder if, in general, cities in planning and zoning haven't overestimated is general parking space. And I'll take, like, say, Wendy's as an example. I mean, my God, they've got a massive parking lot. If they got 15 cars, well, if they have 20 cars in their parking lot, they still have 3/4 of their parking lot that's empty. And I'll pick, like, say, Schaefer's grocery store. There's certain days that they probably need all that parking, but it often seems to me that our parking lots in general in the state are way in the heck too big. They're probably based on that one day worst case scenario. We have a lot of impervious surface that doesn't get used, and I wonder if how we would deal with that, and do we want to deal with it? It just seems like parking lots for many places are way bigger than they need to be. It's my personal take. I'm not saying that I represent the city on that. There's also, under number B3, commercial or industrial parking lots shall be located in the side or the rear area of the development as seen from 371. Or collector and or backage road systems, or no frontage road exists parallel to Highway 371, parking will be allowed up to 40 feet wide in front of the building. And with the landscaping plan, which completely screens the parking lot from the highway, is provided. I don't know. To me, it seems like there's just a whole lot there that makes it more complicated than maybe what we need to. I understand this is probably changing some of what's there. It's not like all brand new, but
That particular item was designed to, if I can use the word, to beautify what the city looks like when you're driving along 371. Instead of looking at rows and rows of cars off the highway, you look at the building with landscaping in the back, and then the parking is either on the side or in the front of the structure. The current downtown parking is probably what you're thinking about. That's grandfathered in at this point. This is only for new stuff.
One thing I would like to add in terms of this section that was just read, this is, I believe, verbatim taken from our current ordinance, and it has just moved over. It probably could be cleaned up a little bit, but this is our current standard.
sure. Item D, landscaping and parking lots. Parking lots with more than 10 parking stalls should have 5% of the surface area landscaped with grass, shrubbery, trees. If we didn't make the parking lot so big, we wouldn't need to have islands of
Yeah.
half-dead grass with bushes with garbage in it and a light pole. To me, that kind of goes back to that whole size thing again. You know, when it comes to snow plowing and that, I'm not so sure those islands are necessarily all that great. Loading berths. Berths shall not be used for storage in excess of 8 hours. When I read that, I was like, well, who's going to enforce that? And maybe it doesn't really get enforced unless it's a big problem, but I know the police department doesn't probably like watching how long somebody's got stuff in a parking spot.
Yeah.
I mean, those are kind of the few things that I gleamed from this. I don't, I'm not necessarily against it, but there's maybe some things that could be looked at more in the future. Parking lot size being one thing. Nisswa, downtown Nisswa is packed with cars and for a few months out of the year, and we get by with that. Sometimes I'd rather see a few cars on the street rather than having 100 by 200 area that never gets used in a parking lot. My personal take.
Right. In the preamble of this ordinance, it is trying to stress that very thing, that they should be looking at essentially the bare minimum that the business needs to operate effectively, is what it's asking people to consider when they're developing their site.
Okay.
I guess I'd like to just, first of all, the size of Schaefer's parking lot and the size of Wendy's parking lot. I live in the city. I hear every day, if you go in the summertime in Wendy's, their parking lot is not too big, especially when you have people pulling in there with boats. If you restrict parking and you have no parking, you have no more customers coming in, which restricts your income. If you take Schaefer's, for example, in the summertime, and we have someone from Schaefer's here, but a quarter of the parking lot is just employees alone. And then if you look for pretty much, especially weekends, that whole parking lot gets used. Again, if you start restricting the size of the parking lots, you restrict the amount of business that these places can take. And if you're not coming from that's my biggest problem with this, is it doesn't come from a retailer or the business side of things. It comes from what we want the city to look like. And that is absolutely the wrong. And I take offense that the parking lots are full of garbage, because I have never seen garbage in Schaefer's parking lot. They do an excellent job, and the same for Wendy's. So they do a good job of maintaining it. It is what it is. When you triple the business in the summertime, you need to have parking for people to park, or these businesses, they'll just keep going if they can't find a parking spot. So I think that needs to be addressed very, very, very carefully. My issues with this, again, come along with the screening and what you're requiring. Highway frontage is valuable because of the visibility, and we keep trying to take that away, and we're not seeing development. All this cost that's going to be put on to the business owner who's trying to make a go of it. Again, everyone sees the summertime, and yes, in the summertime it's busy, but then you got the wintertime to get through to try to make it to the next summer. And so all this added expense, it just leaves it wide open to what is screening, what are trees, especially when you say during off-leaf seasons. So you have to screen it so you can't see it in the wintertime when there's no leaves on there? What does that consist of? And then down here where it says that a plan approved the landscaping according to a plan approved by the Planning Commission, again, that leaves it wide open that the burden, I just think an unnecessary burden we put on the business owners to hinder development. And that's that's the problem that we have, and I just, the way this reads, I would not be for this myself personally.
Just to help me understand, and maybe others, Councilman Kramer, can you give some examples of where there's, say, too much screening or something? I'm just trying to get...
Well, this is saying going forward that they're going to start requiring screening and stuff, and if this was in there before, I've never read it, but, you know, I mean, what is meant by highway approved by planning commission? Screening shall consist of trees, bushes, or similar native vegetation, including non-deciduous vegetation, to provide screening during the leaf off season. What does that mean? What's that going to cost that business to, I mean, to me, this is almost a forest. What's it going to cost the business to do this? And then the other thing is that also increases what it takes for that business to maintain it. And I think that, you know, I think there has to be this fine balance between business and being able to operate and the way things look. And honestly, I think we're blessed with the businesses, a lot of the business we have here, because they do look nice and they do keep them up nice. But we just keep going down this road of, you know, of trying to make the highway look like a forest, and that's not what the value on the highway, 371 highway, is the visibility of these businesses. That's what the value is to that land, and value to the city in taxes, in development, and increasing. You know, we're talking about budget. You know, we want to increase our budget. If we can get some businesses coming in here, that would increase our budget greatly. So I don't know if I answered your question, Mayor, but that's.
I mean, I appreciate your response. I'm just trying to get a visual.
I
you know,
understand.
Because if there's something specifically, then then that helps me just kind of assess. So,
I would say let's be careful not shoot the messenger. Desmond is only telling you what the planning and zoning commission do.
I'm not shooting anybody.
The commission did work for 6 to 8 months on this, talking about having no parking regulations, to having some, to having a little landscaping, to having a lot. So it wasn't done quickly or easily.
I appreciate that.
And there's always in these documents that there is some ability by the planning commission to vary slightly. If you have a parking lot, you don't have to put a tree in. It talks about ground cover and other things too that are very simple. It's the look that you want to achieve. You don't want to drive down 371 and see, well, it looks like a used car lot all over the place.
But it does seem to leave a lot of the approval to this commission, and then that can change with different people on there and through. So it does, it does leave a lot to that, I feel.
Well, and so maybe, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but having spent a couple terms on planning and zoning and kind of knowing how planning and zoning thinks, and even having attended some of the meetings over the last year and a half or so, I don't see where planning and zoning looks to overburden. If anything, sometimes I think there could almost be a little bit more in certain cases. But I don't think there's any. I've not seen any concerns where, where there's been so much put on somebody that you can't see their building. I mean, if you look at some of the newer things that have been built, like Wendy's and the mini mall and Nisswa Marine and places like that, I haven't seen where planning and zoning's been unreasonable in that sense. I certainly appreciate your concern about it. Obviously, I think it's relevant. Very relevant. And that is the balancing act that the Planning and Zoning Commission does deal with.
Just real quick, my other major concern, and Desmond, you brought it up, is enforcement. How are you going to enforce, if there's parking issues, how are you going to enforce it? And that to me is an issue. It needs to be no use having something on the books you can't enforce.
Maybe I can answer that. Remember,
Sure.
in the upcoming budget year, the Planning Commission asked for money for an enforcement officer for part-time, which was deleted out of the budget. So we were trying to do that. There's so much you can do. Normally, you don't go out and look for ordinance violations unless they're very egregious. You act upon when somebody calls in and says, why is so-and-so doing so-and-so? Then you go out and look at them. So that's kind of how you enforce it, unless you see something very egregious. When you're out walking or driving around the city, you depend on people to honor their commitment when they got their permits.
Does planning and zoning, though, have the ability to enforce parking if the person's parking on the street? Or would you just look at it as going to that business and saying you can't, or go, I mean, that's my question.
On a public street, I'll let the attorneys answer the question, but I don't believe on a public street you can tell somebody they can't park on a public street. It's a public street.
Sure.
But does this not say there's no on-street parking?
It does. Or at least that's what I saw in there.
So, but we really can't, well,
So then it's a kind of a recommendation to not have your customers parking on the street any more than necessary. And I don't know, maybe part of that was part of the on-street parking thing. I mean, Don, you're the liaison, Desmond, you're here. I mean, was their discussion was part of that so that a business would not avoid having any parking because people can just park on the street? I mean, can you fill in the gap there a little bit for us?
Well, in the downtown area, there is parking on the street, and then they'd be grandfathered in. In new areas outside of the downtown district, where there is ability to have some parking, you put a minimum amount of parking in for an office. You look at the new bank that's going in, they have a parking lot, but the parking is keyed to the bank business, for the restaurant business, and for the office business. You look at all three and you come up with a number. That's the minimum that they can put in.
I got a good example, Don, I just thought
Okay.
of. So Galdam Brewery
Yep.
has had a lot of parking on the street on Smiley. Now, I look at that and I think that's awesome because there's people in Nisswa, they're doing stuff, they're spending their money in Nisswa. If I look at this ordinance, that tells me he's in violation. And it happens quite often where he has it.
Have an event.
You know, and again, I look at that and go,
It's a blessing.
yeah. So that's where I really have some mixed emotions and mixed on this. Because are we going to enforce that with them? Because now we're taking that revenue away from them.
Normally what you do, if you get a complaint, if you were to call that in, Desmond would go out and make sure that it's as you stated when you called it in, and then he'd go talk with the owner and say, this is not right, so-and-so, here's what we need you to do. Give him some time to handle it. And if he doesn't do it, then you come back and you enforce it.
But why isn't that right? What problem is that causing? Because when you're going and telling him that, you're cutting off his income.
And they're parking on a public street.
Yeah,
So-
street is not normally a public parking lot, no.
It's touchy, it's
I
touchy.
mean, I get that, yeah, there's both sides to it, but I would hate to go tell a business that, hey, you can't have, especially when it doesn't hurt anything. I mean, it's.
Can't have a special event because you're going to have too
So
many cars.
that's, I think, doesn't get quite addressed in here.
Overall, I mean, I shared my concerns. It's probably, most of my concerns probably really, in some ways, aren't with exactly what's written here. It's kind of the whole picture, bigger picture maybe. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and it's not easy. And I know when, having spent time on planning and zoning, when somebody wants to be in violation, that's when you really need the ability to enforce, because if you don't have it, you've got nothing to work with. So, so I would, myself, I'm in favor of this change. There's maybe some more tweaking that could be done, but I also realize planning and zoning has a long list of things that they would like to be making headway on. So any other comments, or would entertain a motion?
I just want to know what was the problem that prompted us to do this in the first place?
I don't know if there was a particular problem that a, business was looking to, do a lot of excessive parking for what the business was. I think this was just essentially a concern about impervious area, wanting to make sure that, if the parking isn't needed, that it would remain more in open space and ability to soak in the waters as when it rains or snows.
Okay. And the other thing I had, and I had talked to Desmond about this the other day, I came in and spent some time with him. For lots fronting a highway or collector street, on-site parking lots and driveways shall be designed in a manner which will allow vehicles to enter the street in a forward-facing direction. What's a collector street? And paraphrasing our conversation, it's kind of something that was used generally in larger cities. You see this a lot. Desmond, can you explain that?
Yeah, that term is more used in larger cities. I don't believe that our zoning ordinance doesn't define what a collector street is. We have local streets, obviously, in front of residential areas. I would take this to mean, state highways, obviously 371, but that is controlled by MnDOT. So we really wouldn't be working in terms of adding driveways there unless it was through, supported by MnDOT. So Smiley Road might be considered a collector street. I can't think of too many others that I would consider that, but our comprehensive plan doesn't identify what a collector street is either. So it's a little challenging.
I just, in my position on this is that, in absence of a comp plan that we're currently using other than the 07 comp plan, I think maybe what we should do is wait, because we're using definitions, we're using words we don't define. It's confusing to builders, it's confusing to people that want to come in and purchase property. It is expensive on 371. And, I guess one of the issues that people have said is, coming in and not being able to get a definition, constantly having to come back to P&Z and back to PZ, back to P&Z is something that has been said has been a problem. I'm wondering if maybe we just don't hold off and instead of passing something to pass it, see where's the problem. Some of the language that's been changed in here, according to what was crossed out, that's listed under the same heading in the old ordinance, looking at the previous page, the language that's appearing in the new ordinance doesn't appear in the old ordinance in some places. So I guess I'm a little perplexed on that, and probably want to sit down and talk with Desmond and a little more and try and figure some of this stuff out. So it's around that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So one last thought that I have, Desmond, because this is not, I'm sharing this with you and the council and everyone here, is, there's becoming, more and more times here where, things are kind of being put together by planning and zoning, and then coming to the council, and the council just really doesn't know any of the background to it. I'm starting to wonder and consider if maybe starting this next year with some of these things, maybe we shouldn't have some workshops with the council and planning and zoning. Everybody get started on the same page anyway, and I think it could potentially help eliminate some of this where it comes to us and then we're like, well, I don't know about this, and Ross says I don't know about that, and we didn't have any, so maybe if we get together and have a bigger group conversation, and then it gets done, from there it goes to a smaller group, maybe it's just P&Z after that or something, or however P&Z may want to do that, and then have more input, so then there's less questions when it gets to this point. So something I'm thinking about, and we may want to get some input from council and P and Z about it, so. So if there's a motion to do something with this, I would certainly entertain it.
I make a motion that we approve the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations and approve zoning ordinance Z0A1518.
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Johnson. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. Item E9, recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission, ordinance amendment revising stream classifications and resort development standards. Desmond?
Can I,
Or Jenny, did
can
you
I
want-
ask, I'm sorry, I just realized that we passed an ordinance. Can we have a motion to approve publishing the summary in the local newspaper, please?
I'll make a motion that we publish the summary in the local newspaper for the ordinance amending the regulations pertaining to parking and loading.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Yep.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. Glad you asked for the clarification. Thank you. So E9, recommendation from Planning and Zoning, ordinance amendment revising stream classifications and resort development standards. So Jenny, do you have anything, or start that off, or Desmond?
No, just that if it does get passed, we'll do the same thing with the summary.
Okay, very good. Desmond?
Yes.
You want to give us a...
Yeah, this is in regard to reclassification of streams and then identifying some language that addresses dock spaces in resort areas. The first part of this ordinance pretty much pertains to falling in line with the DNR standards for their model shoreland ordinance in designating some of our streams as remote, forested, and tributary. Our land use matrix provides the setbacks that would be required of those, each one of those river classifications based on that shoreland model. Another part of this pertains to an unnamed lake that previously wasn't in our classification system. It's not actually within the city, but it lies just a little bit outside of the city. But since their buffer area that is a natural lake extends a little bit into the city, that should probably be also contained within our ordinance. The third part was with regard to continuous docking spaces and short-term docking spaces. Our ordinance currently doesn't identify any, numbers or required numbers or maximum numbers of boat docking spaces. This ordinance will identifies that there would be one docking space permitted for each unit permitted within the first tier of the resort, and that's the first 200 feet. And then it also identifies short-term docking spaces, which would essentially allow for an applicant that is looking to do an expansion of the resort, if it included some ancillary types of uses that you might get customers coming off the water to the lodge or to the site, they would be able to dock at those locations, and of course that would be the review of the Planning Commission based off of information given by the applicant to determine what the necessary minimum would be. So that in essence is about the extent of what this ordinance is, and the Planning Commission is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you.
You might remember, I think it was about 2 council meetings ago, this was before us, and there was a question John raised about the short-term docking space. We went back and inserted that language. It's under C2, and I believe that Grandview personnel have looked at that and said that looks reasonable to them, so that's why it's back here for approval.
It was reasonable to who, Don?
Grandview?
Grandview, okay. One thing that I have some familiarity with is, in the summertime, when a resort's busy, there isn't anybody that's going to keep track of what's going on down at the lake. There's nobody keeping count of, how many boats are guests staying there, how many rental units do they have, and are they in or out? How many people are stopping by to have a sandwich down at the lakefront? I certainly appreciate some, thought to this, but it's an animal all its own, and I think we're blessed to have the people that want to come to the area and enjoy what there is to to use, and I don't know how we ever put something really accurate on this, but I'm not opposed to an effort. Certainly not opposed to an effort.
I guess I got a couple questions, Desmond. So if this ordinance goes into effect, all the resorts that are currently operating are grandfathered in, is that correct?
That's correct. If they have 20 docks out there, of course, they would continue to have those 20 docks. They wouldn't be required to remove anything.
If they expand or do something different, can they be made to then come in compliance with this at that time?
If the dock situation, let's say they were adding more units in the first tier, and the number of dock spaces was, say, 20, let's say in total now they have 15 spaces. Let's say they went from 10 to 15, and they already have 20 docks. They wouldn't be able to expand the dock situation in that circumstance. So that's where it could have impact to a resort expansion.
What if they were just building in off the first tier, but they're doing something different? Can the city say to them at this time, since you're doing something different, you need to come and say they're out of compliance the way it sits? Can the city say to them, you need to come within compliance to the dock to this ordinance?
By eliminating some.
No.
Okay, that's fine. And then my third question is, if they sell their resort, the new owners then would be starting from scratch, and then they would have to come into compliance?
Yeah, if they were to redevelop the resort and look to start essentially new, if they weren't rebuilding in the same footprint, if you will, of what's already out there, then yes, that would constitute, we're starting from scratch.
You have down here that, like beached boat would consider one space. What if the resort has like 3 rental boats that they beach on the shoreline? Is that considered 3 spaces?
Beached boat.
So the number of spaces provided for continuous beaching, mooring, and docking of watercraft must exceed.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that if there's a boat beached, if there's a little fishing boat that's beached on the shore, that's counted as one space.
Under this, yes, that's what it says.
Okay. My final thing and my biggest concern, and we did have a conversation about this, is this was put forth without talking to our resort owners.
Yes.
And I was actually more concerned with the small guy than Grandview, because Grandview is going to, that's, yes, we need to add the short term for Grandview, and that, I agree with that. I think you're limiting them too much. I talked with Dan, and he's out of compliance, and I said, can you operate with any less space? And he said no, and I agree with him. People come, they want to be able to dock their boat. They don't want to take their boat in and out every day.
Right.
And again, we're limiting them. And so I think that more thought has to go into this, and especially with everything that we got in there, the beaching of the boats and stuff. I don't think, part of my thing is, especially under the new comp plan, we talk about how important resorts are, and we talk about how important this, that is to our economy. And then we put something forth here that we really haven't talked to the resort owners and haven't got their, their opinion on it. And I don't mean to, but it kind of is what it is too, so.
True.
That's my view on it.
And I think another question that came up, and this maybe Mr. Ryan that brought it up, is the first tier calculations, and how that impacts the dockage. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was mentioned that, well, first tier, it's kind of encouraging resorts to build as much as they can in the first tier to get as much docking as they want. So
Yeah.
I'm not real fond, and please understand, and I'm sure it's the same with the other councilmen here, we're not picking on you about this. You're here to present it. But I do have some concerns about the number of docks in the first tier thing, because if a resort said, hey, we're going to take out all our buildings in the first tier, and we're going to move them back, and we'd have to say, well, you can't have any docks then, or you can't have hardly any docks. I don't think that would be. So I think there's an issue with what you build in the first tier and how that affects the number of dock spaces.
Well, you look like Richard's at Richard's Resort, and these guys are here if they want to talk, but
Yeah.
a lot of his stuff is off the first tier.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah.
we're just, if you just look at that resort there alone, it would probably change how this got drafted and how it got presented.
Mhm.
So,
If I'm allowed to say something.
You can come up to the podium. State your name, please, for the record, and please share.
Richard Geike, and I own Fritz's Resort. A lot of my first tier is a big hill that goes down to the lake. I have a campground. I can't put campers on that first tier because there's no way to get them there. So I don't know the exact figures because I just got emailed on this yesterday, but probably 85% of my stuff is more than 200 feet away from the lake shore. So I think, just off the top of my head, I probably have 10 or 12 units in that first tier. I have 25 dock slips right now. I can't operate with less than that. So if you're going to put one dock slip per each unit in the first tier, then something needs to be allowed in the second and third tier. I have units that are 500 feet away from the lake. So it just seems like you have to figure out something for that second tier. And Grandview has beautiful elevation. They can build fairly close to the lake. They could pile them up there. I couldn't do that. So I think something needs to be looked at for the second tier as well as the first tier.
Yeah.
Tom, question for you. If I purchase Richard's Resort, he's grandfathered in. If I purchase his resort campground and I run it just like he does, I'm grandfathered in too. The property is grandfathered in, correct?
That's right. The change in ownership wouldn't trigger some change in the status of that pre-existing nonconformity.
Okay. And I discussed this with Desmond too. The number of spaces provided for continuous beaching, mooring, or docking of watercraft must not exceed one for each dwelling unit or site allowed in the first tier. It doesn't say that's built in the first tier. So if I don't build a single unit in my first tier, but under our current ordinances, I could build 20, even though I choose not to. Under the way that, because of the word allowed, I could put 20 docking spaces out there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation of that.
I believe that's how I would interpret it as well,
Yeah,
if it
and
came into me.
We talked about it, yeah.
But if I could, John, and the other side of that is if you have the space on the property for more, but in the first tier you can only have 4. Now all of a sudden,
Exactly.
that's if you got a great big number, then that doesn't seem so bad. But if it's the other way around,
Right.
where you can only have 4, but yet you need 20 or more, that becomes a problem.
well, if you take Richard's example with the hill, are we
Exactly.
considering that a buildable spot?
No.
I wouldn't.
Well, I wouldn't.
Not a buildable spot,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
That wouldn't be counted.
Exactly.
That wouldn't be counted in there.
Right.
So
Right.
It slices both ways. That's the whole thing, and that's why, what can we do for people that have a situation like Fritz's where I can't build there? Or a place, a smaller resort, where I choose not to build down there because I'd rather have my limited first area, that 200 feet. I'd like to have that for amenities, for people to do things in. But I can go back to 3, my second or third tier build. But I think we limit them by not, again, I don't know. I guess I understand what we're trying to do. I understand the reason that the docking stuff came up was a response to a issue that had come before the P&Z board earlier in the year, and it was a problem. I have no problem changing ordinances just for everyone's, if we need to, but if one person comes up and it doesn't work for them, well, okay, sorry. If 5, 6, 8, 9 people come up over the course of a year and they're running it, well, then maybe we do need to look at it, but do we necessarily have to change something for the sake of change? I don't know.
Well, with all the comments tonight, it'd probably be safe to just send it back and let us ruminate on it again.
Okay.
I would just like to say that, what you have proposed here is not enough space for an operation of a resort.
Right.
So.
Can we, can the first part of it, the tributary part, does anyone have an issue with that?
No, I think, the only thing I have an issue with would be just the resort docking, commercial docking.
Do we divide it in half, past that part, or just do it all at once?
Do it all at once.
I see him
Yeah.
shaking his head.
I think Dan, do you want to say something?
Well, I agree with the calculations you're using are too restrictive. And I also have an issue with if a resort is over, which I am, and you buy an adjacent property, from what I've gleaned here, you cannot put in any docking facility for any boats that would be used by those units on that adjacent property. In other words,
Well, if you made it part of if you bought an adjacent, this is the way I would take it. If you bought an adjacent piece of property, made it part of the resort, that would be part of Tier 1, at least the front part of it was.
but you're already over the calculation, so I buy it 100 feet. Then, okay, there's a house or a cabin on there, I want to rent that out. I'm going to have to use, the reason we have the number of docks we have right now is that is how many docks we need to properly run the resort. You add another unit, you go, is it worth it? Now we're just going to have a conflict at the lake. So it takes away an incentive
Sure.
to expand.
Yep.
It puts a block in the way. And I think that density calculations are a hard thing to use because, for instance, we took down a fourplex that had 14 bedrooms in, and we put up 3 units that have a total of 8 bedrooms in it. Our density went up because they aren't built up and down as much. They have a larger footprint each, so that increases our density calculation, but we have fewer units.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we're going to solve it here tonight. So I'll make a motion that we send item 9 on tonight's agenda back to the Planning Commission for additional input.
I'll second.
Okay. I would suggest that Desmond, that you and Don, that the two of you kind of make a quick note of some of the things that came up tonight so that they can be reviewed.
Yeah, and just a suggestion, if you have any comments you'd like to email us, that's preferable, that it's in writing.
And I would, I'm sure we'll reach out to resorts and that, but put your stuff down and get it to us too. How can we work with you? How does it happen?
Yeah, like Richard and Dan, if there's some things that you guys, that you have, and when John's saying get it in writing, get it to the city hall so planning and zoning can get it. So when they get together and they're talking about it, they can review it. Hopefully, well, I would say, I can't say, but maybe some sort of a workshop where we invite in resort owners to give feedback on this would be potentially good, but it's not mine to call, so.
Well, it's starting, I think, is it January or February? P&Z meetings are going to the evenings.
Yes, they are.
February, I think.
Might not be a bad idea.
Actually, in January.
January.
It might not be a bad idea for some from planning and zoning to go out to the resorts and actually physically see what they have and see what's going on.
Yeah, and meet with the owners so the owners can point out their thoughts.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. Okay,
Motion.
motion to table
So if you want to wait for Gary or not?
or send back?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second already.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Moving on. Go get Yeah. Item E10, comprehensive plan, council direction regarding finalization of either the 2017 draft or the 2018 draft. Open for discussion.
Well, I'll start out. What the heck?
Why not?
I've, looked over both drafts, and I talked to staff. Now, the original 2017 draft, when I spoke to staff when it was first presented, every department head that I said they can work with it. Yes, it was a lot of flowery language and different things, and there was some grandiose scale, and there were some things that, but based, eliminating all that, just looking at the guts of it, they said it was something that they could work with. My concern was at the time was about some of that grandiose stuff that was in it. It went back to the P&Z board, and we have the 2018 draft, which I spoke with Desmond about it, and he, as he said, hey, short, sweet, to the point. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need probably some adjusting here and there, just like the 2017 draft would probably need some adjusting. But, and I've talked to Matthew. Matthew was more in favor of the 2017 draft, so that didn't help me. I looked at the staff comments that we all received, and there was one comment in there about scrapping the whole thing and starting over again. What I think after reading this, looking through it, I think we need to. I can vote for either one, okay? And I think we need to keep it in motion. Pick one of them tonight. Send it forward, let's keep it moving, and then each individual commission or committee, I would say, needs to take their part of the plan and, curtail it, cut it down to size if we need to, or put the things in place that need to be put in place, change the language, whatever, we can do that. But then we have a plan, eventually, hopefully by March. Now, when P&Z, Public Works, Parks and Rec, or any other group in the city are asked to do something, they've actually got a plan that they know this is what we're working with. Right now, we're working with the 2007 plan, but making decisions based on that, knowing there's going to be another one coming down the road here, are we going to have to start all over with whatever changes are made operationally, ordinance-wise, all over again? And kind of start that, go back and repeat what we just did. If we have a comp plan and it says 2007 says ABC, the one we finally agreed to says EFG, about the same thing, parking. Okay, for example, now we got to go change the parking ordinance again. Or look at something different. I just think maybe we should keep this process moving forward with either one of the two. And I can support either one. And I know in talking with staff, like I said, I think talking with Jenny, it would be nice to keep it moving forward. Pick one and go. So.
Okay, thanks, John.
So pick one, but allow for tweaks, is what you're
Yes,
saying?
well, absolutely. The comp plan, just because we pass it, doesn't mean we can't change it. We can adapt it and tweak it a little bit better here and there. One thing I did hear from a couple of the department heads was there really wasn't a lot of input from department heads on those parts of the plan that address things that they need to be concerned with or they need to deal with. Let's get one going, let's get it passed, and then we can do that tweaking ourselves to make it work for us. That's what I'm saying. Starting from scratch and starting all over again, with all the public input that's been put in, with all of the people that volunteered their time and did it, with all the people that came to the meetings and had input, we're kind of saying, thanks but no thanks. What's their incentive to do it the next time to help us out on something? So, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but it did to me.
Thanks, John.
In any comprehensive plan, you'll find things that you'll love and things that you'll hate. It's not perfect. It's not a legal document. It's a guideline pointing the way to what the community wants done. To go back, start at ground zero again, I don't think that's not going to work. As you pointed out, too many people to put too much time in. This is not a planning and zoning document. We were just put in place to approve it and send it on with our comments to the council. I don't think the comprehensive plan needs to be a showcase document for the city to send out to people that want to come and live here. It's a working document. It's not like in the metropolitan area where once you adopt a comprehensive plan, you have to change your ordinances. We don't have to do that in greater Minnesota. This is just a recommended course of action for the city. I personally like the latest version that came out of the planning and zoning. It has the 7 basics that the older plans had, but it takes away some of the, I'll call it fluff, things that simply can't be accomplished because we're not going to ride bicycles up here in the middle of the winter to get to a store that's 2 miles away, that kind of a thing. So I would be in favor of the shortened version that came from the planning and zoning. That's the 2018 plan.
I guess for me, I'm in agreement that we need to pass something tonight. I think that this has gone on long enough. I found this from staff to be very helpful. So the first thing what I can't get by between the two is it talks about somebody coming in and reading the 2017 version, and getting more from it. I'd like to meet the person that could sit down and read that from cover to cover in one sitting. And it might just be me, and I'm sure if ADD was, or whatever, was recognized back when I was a kid, I'd been in line for it. But so I can't get past it. That to me, that document is almost unusable. When I sat down with the 2018, I read it, I understood it, and that's where I keep going back to. What I think, and it kind of I'll probably echo what John's saying here, is I think the 2018 is a really good start. I think we got some really good input, which we should have had from before, so our bad for that from city staff. I think we can take the 2018, we can add the pictures, we can add, the rezoning thing is crucial, that needs to get done, or the map, that gets straightened out. But I think we can take the 2018, I think we can make it something that the city really can use. And that's where I lean, and one of the reasons why I lean that way.
Yeah, I'm kind of in almost exact agreement with that. The 2017 I thought was just way too much. This one I thought maybe fell a little bit short, but now in having this discussion and knowing that maybe there's some little tweaks, it's going to be a lot easier to change that one than 17. It's just a matter of adding some of those things, and then I think we've got pretty good
But it's way more usable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm right along the same line, you know, way too much urban, eye in the sky. There's some other terms that are politically incorrect I won't use, and that would go along with that whole thing. And, you know, I think choice being, I think 2018 version is better for the city of Nisswa than the 2017. That being said, I do, again, as I said a little earlier, I think sometimes projects like this, although it started out, and I like the way it started out. I mean, you know, there was things that certainly had changed a lot from the last time I was involved with a comp plan, and there's a lot of fluff that went in that was not a part of any comp plan I'd ever been involved with before. That probably takes it a little overboard. But I do think that there's some things that certainly could be looked at, and probably, you know, more with some of these things, council, planning and zoning workshops to get all the ideas together, or to try to get the ideas together along with the public. Because something that I really struggle with is when a group puts a lot of time into it, and then it comes to the council, and we're kind of like blindsided. We're kind of like, what, you know? You know, could say, well, you could have come to the meetings, but we all have a fair share of things that we need to do. But maybe with some of these things, we need to have a little bit more workshop with those two groups together, so that we get it's like inviting the resort owners. We get all the players together. Everybody lists out their concerns, and then it can go to a smaller group for a draft. And maybe that would have been helpful here if the council would have engaged a little bit more. I mean, I'm not criticizing us, but, you know, what tends to happen, what's happened several times here recently is, or a couple times for sure, is it comes here and we're like, we don't know if we want to pass it or not. And that does make people probably wonder about the time they're putting in. So developing our process for how we do that is maybe something we'll look at next year. So
there were some negative comments about Sourcewell too and stuff.
Yes.
I think we have to keep it in context. The people from Sourcewell had a temporary clerk to work with, that then went to a temporary city administrator to work with, that then went to Jenny to work with. So we were kind of in that state of flux leadership-wise here in the city too. That certainly didn't help. I mean, if that would have made a big difference, I think. So I just, it doesn't matter, but you know, just to throw Sourcewell, I don't think anyone's throwing them under the bus, but just, I mean, it was kind of a perfect storm of confusion in the city for a little while there too, so I think we all know that. But.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council approve the 2018 draft of the comprehensive plan and authorize the clerk to do the necessary formatting, inserting of the correct graphs and zoning maps that are required. And do we have to send that on to the county again?
Yes.
I've already got
Yes,
two
we
or
will.
three versions.
We will do that, but if you direct us to finalize the
Okay.
document, insert the appropriate
And
maps and
authorize
things,
you to send it into the county.
and we'll start that clock and then bring it back to the council in a few months when all of that is done and
I'll
have a
second.
final document.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Ryan. Questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just want to say thank you to the council for your feedback, and appreciative that we'll move this forward and we'll go from there, so thank you.
So you're saying, thank God it's getting off of our, Desmond's probably going to go party tonight too.
Desmond might
and
not want to
Desmond,
come
thank
back.
So Desmond, thank you for, for all the work you've put in the middle of this, so to speak, and so on. And certainly, the Planning and Zoning Commission was a huge part of this, and the 2018 version. And thank everyone for their time with that. Last item under new business, E11, recommendation of candidates for appointment to Planning and Zoning Commission.
I would move that we accept the recommendation to appoint Robert Fear, Joshua Young, and Gary Harris to the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment as presented.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that with the caveat that their terms begin February 1, 2019.
Just a clarification point.
Clarification,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Got you with you. Okay. Was there a second on that?
He was the
I did.
second.
Oh, you were the second. Okay. Sorry, I was thinking about something else. So any questions on the motion?
Fuzzy tonight,
All those in
myself.
favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So Jenny and Desmond, if you two would reach out to those people, let them know, obviously, and then invite them to any and all meetings that are happening now so they can start plugging in a little bit and understanding kind of where things are and what's going on and some of the projects that are upcoming. And if there's anything that you want them to look through to help get up to speed with what planning and zoning's about and the ordinances and so on.
We do provide new commission members with a packet of information, and Desmond and I had a conversation the other day about some training opportunities just to get some of the land use basics for the newcomers as well, and anyone that's invited. So I'll also reach out to the council if you have an interest, but we're going to try to get that on the schedule early 2019 as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I don't. It's great that they get a package. I don't know, Gary, when you were on planning and zoning, we were kind of on at the same time. I don't ever remember getting a package. I was just like, show up to your first meeting, and it's like, huh? Yeah. So that's a vast improvement. I
Yep.
mean, anything that we can do to help people get off to a good start is huge, because it's a daunting amount to learn in even a year. So.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on, old business. Approve commissions and committee appointment procedures policy. Are we ready to do that this evening?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. It appears on page 2. The top it says planning and zoning, underneath that it says park and recreation, and then under that it says public works. You notice under planning and zoning, to be on the commission, it requires public residency or property ownership. You go down to public works, it says public residency or property ownership. But if you go up to the park board, it just says public residency. I thought we were looking at this to be uniform across all platforms. Why are they required just to have public residency, not like the others?
So I can answer that question. So the uniform piece of it is more leaning towards the process than the requirements. And in speaking with our Parks Director, he felt that he receives an appropriate amount of interest whenever there are new commission members that need to fill seats, and he didn't feel the need or wanted to change the requirement at this time, so I didn't propose change to that. But because of the Planning Commission, we didn't have any applicants for a good year or so. We were trying to come up with other ways to invite others that would give them an opportunity to be a part of that.
Well, I know when this was discussed at the Planning Commission, it was unanimous that they felt they should have residency, just residency, and not property ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That's their recommendation on that section.
Okay. Was there a reason for that? I know there were some comments about people not being in the area very often, or?
Yeah, you have that whole argument that people who don't live in the area, even though they may own a half acre of land, they're not as into things as people who live there full-time. I'm only bringing up the point because the planning commission did. I just think we should be uniform if we're going to adopt a uniform policy for all three, that's all.
A couple comments that I have about that. One is, just to reiterate, I think what Jenny had said, I really agree with. And then, whenever there are people who are coming to planning and zoning, or any other group, there's a vetting process. And it's totally up to the people doing the vetting to decide. And if there's, if there's great candidates and somebody doesn't own any property, well, that group could make that decision to do that. If there's a shortage of members and there's a really qualified person, that would be a blessing to the group. I think we should be open to that. So there is. It's not saying that. I shouldn't say. The vetting process, I think, works that out. That's my take. You get a group of applicants, you weed through them. This way, you're not limiting. If you own a business in town but you don't live in town, well, you can't be on. Well, that's. I think it just opens the door for qualified candidates that may not otherwise be.
And my point is, let's be uniform. The park board may be doing great guns right now, but in 2 years or 3 years, who knows? Let's just be uniform in whatever we do. That's all.
Yeah, and that's my take. And where Jenny separated out uniformity, and I tend to believe that it is separated, that there is uniformity between the three in the important part, and then subdivision, so to speak, it's different. And myself, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not saying I'm right.
I don't have a problem with the uniformity aspect of it. We can add that to the Park and Rec Advisory Committee as well. I understand Matthew's position on it. Normally, that's what the department head wants, that's fine. But it is it would be uniform throughout. It's the same. I don't think it's going to affect Parks and Rec a bit. I think
True.
I think it'll be just fine the way it is. But I am firmly in support of people that own property. We have people in this community that have owned property for over, probably since the community started.
50 to 100 years.
Yeah,
Some
and
over 100.
they can't, they have ideas. That's why I support it. I'd like to see them. I think they pay a lot, they should have a voice. I'll tell you, being a parent of an open enrolled student in Pequot, you didn't have a voice. It's kind of got to be a little, it was very evident when you address things up there. So I think we should give people a voice, and I would be for adding that to the Park and Rec, making it consistent with P&Z and Public Works.
Is that a motion?
Well, I would change that language, but I mean, if you're entertaining a motion on this at the time, or anyone else?
Well, just point of order that in order to make this work, we're going to have to direct Jenny to go back and look at the ordinances, because this does change ordinances.
Yep.
They have to do that, then we have to have a public hearing, so that would all have to come back to us at the January meeting with all the ordinance changes and the public hearing before us, and then we can adopt it.
Then we could change the language for Parks and Rec and do it all at the same time, right?
That's fine, as long as I have direction from the council that with this one change, that then we're good to move forward. Yes, yep, and then we'll move forward with the ordinance amendments and bring it all back for public hearing in January.
I would make the motion that we add to Park and Recreational Advisory Committee, public residency or property ownership required, as opposed to just public residency required. And then bring it back in January and do what she said.
Second.
Second by Jacobson. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item G, council reports. Mayor. Well, I just want to thank Ross for his time on the council, and
Yes, your last one.
wish you good luck, and look forward to seeing you around town, and hope things, hope the wind is always at your back. And that's all I have for the evening. So, council members, Don?
I want to throw my hat in the ring on Ross. You've been a great asset to this commission. I appreciate your insights and your comments that you made. I didn't always agree with you, but that's because I was right and you were wrong.
And I realize that. I can see to that.
But it takes a lot of time and energy to do what you did for the last 4 years, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you very much, and I think the city does too. One other thing, there's a property up on Birch Street that we brought up before the council at times, a couple times before. We sent out a engineer, and he was not allowed on the property to inspect the structure. We have a letter from the attorney. My voice is really going. We have a letter from the attorney saying what we can do, but we haven't authorized anything to be done. I just wanted to bring that up. The question is, what now? We can't get onto the property. We can't do some of the things that the attorney said we should be doing in the letter. So what do? If we don't do anything, the property just sits there and it's an eyesore. I think we should do something. I don't know if the attorney's got any more ideas or...
Well, here's what I would recommend with that, Don, because we're past doing business, is that we put it on next month's agenda, and we put it on as a business item.
Okay.
Because that's one of the things that I was referring to last month with council reports. Council reports, we're done doing the business part, so to speak. So if you want to bring something like this up and you say, hey, let's put it on the agenda for next month, that's great. But to get into making decisions, I feel like nobody's had time to think about it. So let's put it on the agenda for next month and talk with maybe Jenny and Desmond and Tom and we'll whoever, and we'll figure out what to do.
Well, that's why I said I didn't want it to die, so what now? So that's fine, put it on next month. We dig out the old letter from the attorney on that. And finally, the third thing, I'm not going to say happy holidays because it's not happy holidays, it's Merry Christmas.
Amen.
And I don't care if it's politically incorrect or not. Merry Christmas to all of you.
Thank you.
I touched on a little bit in our budget meeting beforehand, and I guess probably for a January, February council, I do want to address the park and rec truck and move forward with that.
Okay.
And echo everybody
Let's put
else's
that on-
comments.
put
Thank
that on
you,
the
Ross, for serving the city. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, and hope we're not strangers.
I guess I got nothing, but it has been an honor to be here. I've learned a lot. I appreciate you all and wish everyone here the best of luck.
The only thing I have is Tom and I have been talking, and just to let you know that we'll keep everyone up to date on it, but one of the issues Tom brought up to me about public work stuff is when somebody does something that he brought up some different scenarios that have happened in the past. He goes, but what can I do about it? So we're going to be discussing that at our public works meeting. How do we go about that kind of stuff? I'm sure we'll send something from Jenny to Tom and you guys, but that was all I had. And Ross, thank you very much. It's been fun.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion
Adjourn?
to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Boy, you get out of here.
8:44 p.m.
You talk in this here. I can hardly hear this, I'm half deaf, so if I didn't give you the proper response, I'm sorry.